Well, Brandan Leauby is on the Ben Schneider show. Brandon, it's so good to see you. I know it's been far too long since we last talked. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. Preparing for school start again at Covenant with working there now. So a little bit of a busy time, but I'm happy to get to talk about this uh live golf stuff with you.
Yeah, so for those of you who may not be aware, Brandon and I have known each other for a long time, went to high school together, and he is, I would say, and Brandon, you can correct me if you think I'm wrong here, but I would say you are as into golf as I am into motorsports and racing. And to flip it around, I would say you are probably as into motorsports and racing as I am into golf, in that we know the big names of the respective sports. I'm well aware that the Masters is the big tournament every year, the crown jewel that everybody wants to win. I know, all the basic fundamental rules of how the game is played. And I'm aware at a very basic level of the split that's happening right now with a lot of PGA golfers deflecting to the LIV Tour, but I couldn't tell you the ins and outs of all the, tiny little things that only the diehards know. I couldn't tell you who just won the most recent tournament. Normally, I couldn't tell you where the PGA Tour is on any given week, although it's very timely. I think they're in Delaware this week. Is that right?
Yes, they are
Curious
in
about
Delaware,
that.
and
So, that's kind of just to give the audience, a little bit of a background before we get into this. That's kind of where we are on each of these sports. But the reason I wanted to talk to you today, because at some point, I'd love to bring you back on here and we can do a little bit deeper dive into, our cross country days and everything like that, like I did with Noah on this show last year. But that's not why I brought you here today. I brought you here today because I think most sports fans are aware of what's happening in the world of golf right now. And on the racing side of things, I've seen a lot of people, and I'll even throw myself in here, saying golf has gone full kart IRL. They're comparing the PGA LIV split to the kart IRL split. So I guess just to start off here, I know I sent you that Outside the Lines documentary. I know you didn't get a chance to watch the whole thing, but how familiar are you with what happened with kart IRL in the 90s?
I am honestly not very familiar with it at all, but I know that there was some sort of split, and I have seen probably as you have that it is the thing that's being compared most to the current state of golf. And so but yeah, that's pretty much my extent of my knowledge on that.
Well, the reason that I wanted to talk to you about this is because I think obviously you have much more a much bigger knowledge in terms of the sport in general, and might be able to answer some of the questions I have. Because from what I can tell, just again from a basic kind of outsiders or casual sports fan, casual golf fan point of view, I'm not so sure that there are very many similarities in terms of the reasons behind why the split is happening or how the split even got started. So I guess if you don't mind, I can just try to fill you in quickly here in 1 or 2 minutes, the
Yeah,
Cliff Notes
go
version of
ahead.
Kart IRL. Tony George was one of the descendants of the Holman George family that owned the Indianapolis Motor Speedway basically from the end of World War II to just 3 years ago when Roger Penske bought it at the end of 2019. And he did not like the direction that kart was going in terms of sanctioning American open wheel racing. And so he decided that he would form a new series called the Indy Racing League, or IRL for short. They would take the Indianapolis 500, make that their big event. It was originally supposed to actually be the season finale and kind of do like a split calendar, or split the years so that the Indy 500 could still be in May, but end the calendar year for the series. And he would lock out 25 of the Indy 500's 33 starting spots for IRL teams. So the kart teams essentially would only be competing for 8 spots because Tony George wanted to give priority to the IRL teams. Kart didn't like that at all. They just completely boycotted the race and tried to form their own 500-mile race of Michigan, and it didn't go so well. There was a massive accident on lap 1 of the first race in 96. The race only lasted for a handful of years. By the time 2000, 2001 came around, a lot of the big teams had moved from kart to the IRL. Kart went bankrupt. They rebranded as Champ Car in 2004. That only lasted for 4 years. 2008, the two series came back together. They reunified and became the IndyCar series as it is today. But the sport is still trying to recover and get back to that level it was at in the 90s. I don't know if it's ever going to get back to that level, but despite the reunification, there's still lasting damage from what happened with the split. So the reason George formed the IRL was primarily to give American drivers and teams more opportunities in the sport and try to make things a little bit more cost effective. But I think the cost to doing that far outweighed the benefits of his intentions. What I see with the PGA and LIV, though, is obviously, you can draw comparisons as well, golf being an individual sport, even though there are, teams that help drivers over on the racing side of things, obviously, like pit crew members and things like that. The main reason that I see these golfers deflecting is for financial reasons. You see the headlines that LIV offered Tiger Woods upwards of $700-800 million. Obviously, Phil Mickelson's been in the news with his 9-figure contracts and everything, but I want to know, what was the reason behind the starting up of this LIV Golf Tour? And are there any reasons that you can think of beyond just the financial aspect why players might want to go play over there rather than staying in an established league like the PGA?
Well, I think the idea of initially, before LIV got involved and before Saudi Arabia got involved in funding it, was there's been this idea of having a series of events for the top players in golf. And so it's really been around for a while. I mean, this is Greg Norman's second go at doing this. He tried to form a breakaway series back in the mid 90s that failed almost immediately. In fact, in terms of TV rights, that group got farther than LIV is currently. So there's always been that desire of like it was originally thought of as like a premier golf league type thing to reward the top players. The main reason, other than financial reasons, that I've seen right now pretty much, and Dustin Johnson came out and said this after one of the LIV events, was he wants to play golf less. And so you see a good number of the major names that have gone over to LIV have been these players who have either been out there on tour, have mostly been out on tour for a while. They're looking now more for guaranteed money and potentially even playing less golf. And so I think that's the main reason, outside of financial reasons, is that some of these players really just want to play less.
And it's
which is
54
kind of counterintuitive. If you're someone who loves the game, it seems weird that you want to play less of it.
and it's
But
54 holes instead of 72, right? There's
yes, it's 54 holes instead of 72, and then everybody starts at the same time. And so it's a shotgun start. And so they're spread all out around the course. So it's actually, from what I've witnessed watching it, it's a lot quicker than the PGA Tour. And their LIV is more like a 4-hour round, where PGA Tour rounds are typically in the 5-hour range.
So I guess you bring up another good point as well. I guess one of the reasons LIV has been so controversial is not just because it's split the sport of golf apart, but also the LIV Tour is backed by Saudi Arabia, and that obviously causes some uneasy feelings over here in the States as well. So I guess if you said this is Greg Norman's kind of project here, an idea, and has been for a while.
Well, Greg Norman's been trying to do this for a while, and so when, I think, from my understanding, when the Saudis got involved, it was relatively easy decision to approach him. I do know that at one point they did try to approach Jack Nicklaus about being the head of the face of it, and that conversation did not go over well.
Yeah, and I heard Charles Barkley was maybe being courted as an analyst or something, but I guess nothing really came of that.
He was being courted as an analyst. He played the Pro-Am at the Bedminster event a few weeks ago, and I'm not sure they ever really gave him an offer per se, but that was basically the deadline he gave them to give him an offer, and he decided that he was better off staying with TNT and the NBA.
So when you see these connections with Saudi Arabia and the controversy that that's caused here in the States, I don't want to risk getting too political here, but is that something that you think might be a turnoff to you as a viewer? Or is that something that you kind of put in the back of your mind and you say, I just want to see the best golfers in the world and I'm going to compare PGA and LIV and make my decisions from there based on the golf that I see and the golfers that I see in each of those leagues?
I think it's a mixture of both. I think from a certain extent, based off of Saudi Arabia sponsoring the Saudi International, which was a European tour event and is now an Asian tour event. The tour, both European and PGA Tour, so response to that has been a little bit like, I don't necessarily want to say hypocritical, but a little confusing because the Saudis have funded events on the European Tour before, which the PGA Tour allowed its players to take part in too. But as a viewer, primarily, I'm more concerned with the golf at the moment than really necessarily where the money's coming from. It is something that makes me pay more attention to talk about the money involved a little bit more. But I think in general, if it's something that the viewers find entertaining and want to watch, the money is in general not going to be the biggest factor in determining viewership.
Well, you used a word there in hypocritical that I think has kind of been thrown around a little bit. I still remember. I think I sent you the tweet when I saw it. Will Kane put out a little mini thread on Twitter a couple of months ago, and he was basically saying that the only consistency in all this controversy here is hypocrisy, and comparing it to the controversies with the NBA's relationship with China and how that maybe turns some viewers off here in the States as well. But he also mentioned, people have their political leanings, and those that are so quick to criticize Phil Mickelson for the hot water he got into and the LIV Tour and everything, they're usually silent on the NBA and China and that controversy there. Those that are the first to rush to LeBron and criticize him for his business with China haven't said so much about what's going on with LIV and Saudi Arabia there. So, I think we look at these things as fans, and I can even speak, as an F1 fan. There you see these races popping up in the Middle East, including Saudi Arabia, and there was a big controversy with a missile strike that happened nearby the track earlier this season, and they have a contract in place now. I don't even know if it's 2030 or 2035. Like, they're going to be there for close to another decade, and they have that locked in. And there's always the moral aspect behind that as well. But I think a lot of times as well, just especially from you and I being, at the end of the day, we're fans of these respective sports. We just want to see the best athletes do what they do. And it's kind of hard, and not to say that these issues aren't important, but you do want to try, I think, at the end of the day, just to put it all out of your mind, because we're all fans of the sport at the end of the day, and we just want to watch the sport that we love, and not have to, I'm hesitant to use the word, like have it as an escape from everything that's going on, because again, we don't want to completely ignore those things. But that's kind of where I think a lot of people fall, not just on the PGA-LIV issue, but on the issue in other sports as well, because no sport, I think, is completely sinless when it comes to those deals, behind the scenes with what happens with the business side of things.
I mean, most definitely. I mean, to speak a little bit further, the same group that owns LIV is the same group that just acquired Newcastle United in the Premier League. I think they're in the Premier League. My soccer is about as good as my auto racing.
That sounds right. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I agree. I agree that when it comes to wanting to see the best players, the fans are not necessarily going to take into account all of these external issues. And that's not necessarily right or wrong. It's just where we are at.
So I want to ask you about Phil Mickelson in particular here, because I think, for a lot of people, certainly after Tiger Woods, I think Phil might be the number two most recognizable golf name here in the United States, or at least, has been up until these last few years. You've got guys like Spieth and Rory and things like that, but maybe Phil's back there again now based on the controversy and everything. I remember just seeing in the headlines that he was kind of in hot water before the whole LIV Golf thing started with what he was doing with Saudi Arabia. So kind of take me through his journey and what the controversy has been there. Because I know he like stepped away from social media and really the public eye entirely for a while. And obviously now he has this massive contract to go play and live. And from what I've seen, his golf has not been that great either. So what's going on with Phil?
Well, I'll start off with this. I love Phil, and I still love Phil, even when he does do things that I don't necessarily agree with. But I am a Phil fan, and yes, his golf has been very bad. I think at one point, in 11 rounds of golf since May, he was like 41 over or something like that. But his is rather complicated journey. The first thing is that he got into hot water over his comments about Saudi Arabia, I think in February of this year. And basically he was saying that they're scary to deal with, but they give leverage against the PGA Tour, what he called the tour's obnoxious greed when it comes to money and media rights. And he expressed frustrations over not having access to his own highlights because the PGA Tour owned them. And so after that, he announced that he was taking some time away from the game. But we're still learning a lot about what exactly that looks like. So he stepped away in late February, early March, I believe. And we now know, according to the antitrust lawsuit that the LIV players have filed against the PGA Tour, according to that, he's been suspended by the tour since March, and also banned from that March date for the next 2 years. So barring the courts striking down that suspension, you won't be seeing him play on the PGA Tour until 2024 at the earliest. So the majors being run by different governing bodies than the PGA Tour have not said one way or the other about LIV Golf, and the U.S. Open and the Open Championship let LIV players play this year, and so he was able to play in those two majors, and then he's played in all three LIV events. So the step away from golf is, I think, partly due to himself, his personal decision to do that, but also he was under suspension from the PGA Tour at that time as well. And so that's we're still learning more about how all that took place through these lawsuits and such. So we're still learning more about how all Phil, his inclusion in forming this tour, because he was suspended for recruiting players to LIV and also for helping them formulate their operating agreement. So he's been very involved for a while now.
Well, I think you might have just answered what I was going to follow up with there. Again, to kind of draw it back to, what I'm familiar with the card IRL, there was nothing stopping the cart teams from entering. They had 8 open spots of the Indy 500 if they wanted them, but it was severely limited. Obviously, there were a lot more than 8 teams, so most of them chose not to go to the 500. I believe there was a team named Walker Racing that entered cars in both races, but they were the only ones. And it took a few years for them to come back to the 500 slowly but surely, the Ganassis and Penske's of the world. So what's the status with each of the 4 major tournaments? Because I know you said they're operated and sanctioned independently from the PGA. Is there talk that depending on how these lawsuits go, maybe the LIV golfers won't be allowed to compete, or will they be allowed to compete? And where do we stand with just regular PGA events? If there's a tournament that somebody, maybe they're a local, they want to participate in a particular tournament on one weekend, where do we stand with their eligibility there?
So to start with PGA Tour in general, all PGA Tour members that have played in LIV events are currently suspended indefinitely. So they're not able to participate. And in fact, many of those who have defected over to LIV have actually resigned their PGA Tour membership. So that affects regular tour events. PGA Championship this year and Masters were both before the first LIV event, so no suspensions were handed out. PGA of America membership is through the PGA Tour, so it would follow that those who play in the LIV Tour would not be able to participate in the PGA Championship unless they were exempt from in any of the other categories, like major winner in the last 5 years or Players Championship winner in the last 3 years. The US Open and the Open are a little bit harder for them to say no, because it's an open, so there's open qualifying for both events, and so players could go through that to qualify for the US Open. And then the Masters by invitation only, again, that was before the first LIV event as well. And according to the latest LIV lawsuit, it claims that Fred Ridley, the chairman of Augusta National, is going to come down hard on LIV players and probably not let them play. But in my personal opinion, I think they're waiting for LIV's World Golf Rankings application result, because if LIV Golf events are denied world ranking points, then the majors don't really have to do anything, because all the LIV players will cycle out because they're not maintaining their world ranking. And it's already starting to take effect because they're operating without world ranking points now. Dustin Johnson just fell out of the top 20 for the first time in 7 years. And so I think that's the next major piece for the 4 major governing bodies. That will be the next piece to fall, is how they respond to the potential of LIV Golf getting world ranking points.
Well, that certainly makes sense. If you're not participating in the events that give you the ranking points, you're obviously going to drop, and I guess that problem might take care of itself. I don't know if you caught First Take yesterday, but there was a topic that came up. Stephen A. Smith was not too happy with Tiger Woods because he was, from his perspective, I guess, this is, a capitalistic society, and, you can't necessarily blame these players for making financial decisions, because not everybody was offered Tiger kind of money from LIV, but there's still 8-figure or 9-figure amounts here at stake for the players that are playing in LIV Golf. So I guess again, to kind of bring it back to the whole money thing, do you think that there's going to be an opportunity for these two sides to come together in the near future, or if LIV continues to reach into the pockets of the Saudi government and be able to offer these outrageous, figures to these golfers, do you just see more golfers deciding to take that money and continue to move over to the LIV Tour?
I'm glad you brought that up because I saw that clip last night and it was really interesting to me to see Stephen A. Smith say that. I think the sooner that the two sides start talking together to come up with some sort of compromise, the better. I don't think that means that LIV goes away totally, but that they find a way to work with each other is the best way forward for the game. I think the money part is going to be an issue. The disparity right now between what the PGA Tour is offering and what LIV has, but the PGA Tour is trying to make inroads on that. They announced purse increases for some events next year, and they just released a internal memo, I guess, trying to say they used Jim Furyk, another one of my favorite golfers, career to highlight how much more golfers will make going forward, saying that if Jim Furyk, who's I believe earned about $78 million in his over the course of his career, if his career started today and it followed the same trajectory, he would end up making closer to $680 million in the course of his career. And so, but I think the only way forward, because LIV is not going away, is for them to make some sort of deal where PGA Tour leaves the fall completely open so that players can play in the LIV events, or I don't know what the deal looks like, but they do need to start talking to each other.
Yeah, well, of course, again, what happened with the IndyCar stuff is CART went bankrupt, reorganized as Champ Car, and then they followed a similar trajectory, and a merge was
Yeah,
kind of
I don't
inevitable. I don't see
I
LIV
don't
running
see
out of money
that
anytime soon, or the PGA for that
unless
matter.
the only way I see a merger is if LIV ends up buying the PGA Tour somehow. Which I don't really I know they have a lot of money, but I'm not sure they have that much money.
Yeah, and again, just coming at it from a casual's perspective here, but I think if a deal like that were to go down, we're talking years and years down the
Oh
line
yeah.
where that would even be a remote possibility. I guess to bounce off of Tiger a little bit, why do you think Tiger is so committed to the PGA? Because obviously Tiger's, I think I've seen him in the news, he's like the third athlete to make $1 billion in his career, so he's obviously he can afford to turn down any figure that LIV is offering him. He's set there, but he's certainly closer to the end of his career than the beginning. Why do you think he's so committed to the PGA to the point where he not only turned down the money, but he's trying to organize a response within the PGA's remaining members as to how we move forward here?
Well, I think quite honestly, Tiger can do pretty much whatever he wants in the PGA Tour. Because he's single-handedly made the PGA Tour what it is, the modern golfer, basically. And so I think part of it is gratefulness, I guess. Not necessarily the best word, but this
Oh,
is
sure, yeah.
this is what made his career. But then the question is, why isn't everybody approaching it that way? But I think it's the PGA Tour is somewhere that he is the voice. If Tiger says something related to the PGA Tour, you listen. And while the Phil and Greg Norman, have a decent voice or had a decent voice at one time on the tour, it's not going to compare to Tiger. And I don't think Tiger would have the same voice in LIV as he does in the PGA Tour. So I think that plays a large role in it. And so it's where he has power and the voice to make things happen.
Well, obviously Tiger's synonymous with the game, and you just only need to take a look at the ratings when he plays versus when he's injured and he's not playing, and that's a fair enough representation of how important he is to the sport entirely, and in particularly the PGA. I guess to again continue on his story and his situation. Do you see him possibly maybe playing a little bit longer than he would have in an alternate world where this split doesn't happen, because the PGA might come to him and offer him basically anything that he wants to try to stay as long as he can, because they are just as well aware as everybody else that as long as Tiger's playing, there's going to be a market there, and the minute that he steps away, it's going to be a lot harder to rebuild that.
I don't really think that's the case. Tiger is going to play as long as he thinks he can win. And I think as he gets healthier, he might play more. But I think Tiger is primarily going to be playing in the majors only going forward. There's been talk of him playing a few events in the spring out in California. But I don't think Tiger is extending his career solely for the purpose of the split. I think Tiger plays until he knows he can't win again. And I think I still think he can win on tour. It's gonna take a lot and the right conditions and the right week, but I think that amount of talent that he still has enough to find a way to win.
Yeah, well, of course, he's been through so much really throughout his career, but just the last year and a half or so in particular with the accident and everything, and just the fact that he's walking again, let alone playing golf, let alone playing at this level, is a win in and of itself. And anything beyond that,
yeah, he's incredibly grateful to be playing golf. I mean, you see how emotional he got walking down the 18th at St. Andrews this summer when he missed on a Friday when he missed the cut. I mean, he was practically in tears by the time he reached the green. And so, yeah, he's just grateful to be playing golf again.
So there's one more follow-up I have on Tiger, because I'm a stats and numbers guy, and I have to ask. I look at Tiger and the list of the all-time most PGA Tour wins, and he's level with Sam Snead at 82 for the most all-time. And you think of how many golfers have won events after their 50th birthday, and Tiger's only what is he now, 46, 47?
Sounds about right.
Yeah. So he's still got a few years before he reaches that age. Do you think Tiger has, I mean, I know you said you think he can still win, but is that any extra motivation for him to continue to stick around and try to add some events to his schedule to try to break that tie, or is he just concerned with what's best for him, and the numbers don't really mean as much at this point in his career?
I think for the most part, it's not the 82 number that he's more concerned with. I still think he wants to tie Jack with majors. Now, will that pursuit drive him to golf past his ability? I'm not sure that he's willing to do that anymore with his physical status, but I do think that it's still the majors that are driving him. I just see that this year with him only playing in the majors. But yeah, I think definitely there's motivation to break the 82, but also still to somehow, some way tie Jack with 18, and maybe, just maybe, even pass him, but definitely tie him.
He's on 15 now. Is that right?
Yes, he's on
With
15
the Masters in
with the
2019,
Masters.
last one. Yeah, I
Yes.
guess, that's an interesting dynamic because, maybe you would want to save your energy for the majors if that's the record you're chasing. But, then you've got 3 to tie, 4 to go ahead and overtake Jack there. That seems like that's going to be quite a tall order
It's
at
a
this point for him. And
it
especially
it
because I
is
guess,
quite a tall order.
yeah, and especially because of what you were talking about earlier, if the LIV golfers are allowed to come back for the majors, then that only, adds to the competition level there. So I guess it would, in theory, certainly be much easier to pick up any PGA Tour win versus 3 majors. And I guess if he gets the 3 majors by default, you pass Snead there as well, right?
Yes.
Even though they're not
Yes.
completely organized by the PGA, but it
They
counts as a tour
they
win.
still count as tour wins.
Sure.
But so they would count as tour wins both here and over in Europe. But yes, I do think that I actually saw a very I found it kind of funny headline today that was like, do we want more golfers to go to LIV so that Tiger can break the records? I'm like, I'm not sure that's the way Tiger really wants to break it, but there's an interesting argument there to be made. I didn't really read it, but I was like, huh, that's a different way to look at it for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, there's still a lot of big names and really good golfers on the PGA side that haven't moved over besides Tiger, right? So it's, he's
Yeah,
still got plenty of competition to deal with in any
most
PGA.
definitely. Uh, yeah, most definitely. I think with Dustin Johnson dropping out of the top 20, I think the top 20 are still fully uh with the PGA Tour, except maybe Bryson DeChambeau may still be in the top 20. But yeah, and with Cameron Smith potentially moving over to LIV, actually looking more likely by the day, there would be 2. That would by far be LIV's biggest catch.
Yeah, well, I've seen, it seems like just nothing but constant rumors that that's all but a done deal. It just needs to be formalized and announced that Smith's gonna move over as well. But like I said,
It will be very interesting if he's announced player of the year. And
yeah,
then I think if he wins the tour championship, he becomes #1 in the world. And so it'll be very interesting to see the reaction after that. The #1 player in the world, reigning Open championship, reigning tour champion, going over to LIV would be even more to this already very developing and interesting situation. Would be like another log on the fire, essentially.
so I guess just to kind of tie it all together and wrap it up here, obviously in a situation like this, everything happens so quickly and changes by the day in many respects, and it's very hard to predict. But what do you see the future of the sport of golf looking like maybe 1 year, 5 years, potentially even 10 years down the road if things continue to go at the rate that they're going and you don't see a merger between LIV and PGA or LIV buying PGA, certainly not anytime in the near future? What does the future of golf look like? How does that affect things like the Ryder Cup and other international tournaments and, other independent things? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, that's very complicated. Ryder Cup and President's Cup right now are all gonna be non-LIV golfers. I mean, with Stenson being stripped of his captaincy for the European side for going over to LIV, that is pretty much a foregone conclusion at this point. But I think for the health of the game, that there needs to be a partnership. The PGA Tour does need to improve in many areas. I mean, sometimes going tournament to tournament without without a major in there, it could very easily be seen as very similar tournaments. The product has gone slightly stale, and so there are valid complaints with the PGA Tour and with LIV, and so they need to. I think the first step is them talking and trying to work out. And I think what it could look like is the PGA Tour running from January to August to right before Labor Day, and then LIV Golf taking over the fall schedule. And I think right now that would be a win for both sides, and make it so players can play in both. Get rid of these suspensions and see the PGA Tour relax its rules on playing on other tours. But I think for that for the health of the game is necessary, and also for the health of the Ryder Cup and the President's Cup, to let these players, many of whom are probably past their Ryder Cup playing days, but have been iconic in Ryder Cups, and to let these guys have captaincies down the road. You want people who are iconic in the Ryder Cup to lead these Ryder Cup teams. And so, I mean, I know Phil was originally being considered for 2025 up at when the Ryder Cup's at Bethpage in New York. And so I think it's necessary to bring these guys back in and form some kind of partnership. How that's going to play out, it's impossible to say, but I think the best case scenario or an adequate outcome would be split the calendar, make it so that players have the opportunity to play in both events, and just to improve the overall product of the game. I mean, I think that's really how they have to approach discussing where to go from here.
Yeah, and well, again, to draw it all back to what we started and comparing it, I certainly hope the golf can do that, because that was the goal in Carden IRL, that on the one day in late May, the Indianapolis 500, that the two sides could put aside their differences and come together for that one event. And obviously they weren't able to do so, and it took reunification to bring everybody back on a level playing field. I would hope that, like you were saying, for all the majors and tournaments like the Ryder Cup and things like that, that we could put aside the differences of both PGA and LIV here and allow as many great golfers all around the world to come together for those special occasions and to compete on an equal playing field, with all the best golfers being able to play and being able to attend. So again, I hope that they're more successful in striking a deal to allow that than the IndyCar folks were in the 90s. Brandan, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you answering some of my questions and kind of
Thanks
trying
for
to
having me on.
everything that's going on. You're welcome. And I always tell people, anytime you want to come back, just reach out to me, and we can try to make something happen there. And of course, I'm sure the saga is far from over. So if there's another major story that breaks, I know you're just a text or a phone call away, and we can continue the conversation from there. But like I said, thanks again, and best of luck with the new semester.
Yeah, thank you. I would. I mean, it's gonna change over the next few months, and I would love to come back on and keep talking about this, because it's not gonna go away. But yeah, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, we'll both continue to monitor it, and like I said, thanks for accepting my offer and coming on, because I learned a lot about what's happening today, and it's a very fascinating development. I don't know that it's necessarily good for the sport. I know people who you don't normally see talking about it are talking about the sport, and maybe there's that saying that any publicity is good publicity, but at the same time, it is a very complicated issue. And I think, a lot of people are being hurt by what's happening. So hopefully, we can minimize that and just continue to enjoy the game going forward here.
I totally agree.
All right. Thanks again. And like I said, we'll talk to you soon.